happens when America's sweetheart, the woman whose smile has graced 1,000 magazine covers and whose warmth has melted millions of hearts, walks into what should be a friendly morning chat show, only to discover she's been set up for public execution? When Julia Roberts, Hollywood royalty, with 3 decades of beloved performances and a reputation so pristine it practically sparkled, stepped onto the set of The View that October morning, she had no idea she was about to experience the most brutal ambush of her entire career. This wasn't going to be just another promotional interview gone slightly awkward. This was going to be a masterclass in how grace under fire looks when someone who's spent 30 years being kind, finally, definitively, reaches their breaking point. What you're about to witness is the moment America's most beloved actress reminded the world that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness, that patience has limits, and that even the gentlest soul has teeth when cornered. This is the story of how Julia Roberts walked into a trap, turned it inside out, and walked away, leaving her attacker speechless and humiliated. The morning started like any other at the Paramount Studios lot in New York City. The October air carried that perfect autumn crispness, the kind that makes everything feel sharp and alive. Production vans lined the streets between sound stages. Crew members hurried with purpose, carrying equipment, checking lighting, ensuring every technical detail was perfect for the live broadcast. In Studio 7, the set of The View gleamed under the harsh brightness of television lighting, the distinctive curved desk polished to a mirror shine, the colorful backdrop vibrant and camera-ready. Julia Roberts arrived at 7:15, a full hour and 45 minutes before the 9 o'clock live broadcast. Punctuality had been drilled into her from her earliest days in the industry, back when she was a nobody hoping for her big break, and success had never eroded that fundamental professionalism. Her car pulled smoothly into the designated spot, and she emerged wearing an elegant emerald silk dress that complemented her famous auburn hair perfectly. At 55, she remained breathtaking, not in the artificial, surgically maintained way of so many Hollywood stars, but with the natural radiance of someone who'd lived fully and well. Her face showed character rather than age, laugh lines around her eyes speaking to 3 decades of genuine joy and authentic smiles. Inside the green room, makeup artists fussed over her, though she needed minimal help. Her skin glowed with health, her eyes sparkled with warmth, and that smile, that legendary million-watt smile, came easily and often as she chatted with the crew. "How's your daughter doing?" she asked the makeup artist, remembering a conversation from her last visit 6 months ago. "She was starting college, right?" The woman's face lit up. "You remembered. She's doing great, actually. Loving her sociology classes." "That's wonderful," Julia said, her attention fully present, making the woman feel seen and valued in a way that had nothing to do with cameras or publicity. It was simply who she was. A young production assistant hovered nearby, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Miss Roberts, we're so thrilled to have you here today. I've watched Pretty Woman probably 200 times. It's literally my comfort movie when life gets hard." Julia turned that radiant smile on her. "That's incredibly sweet of you. That film holds such a special place in my heart too. It changed my whole life." "Joy is particularly excited about today's interview," the assistant added, and something in her tone, a slight hesitation, a nervous edge, made Julia glance up sharply from the mirror. But the young woman had already scurried away, clipboard clutched to her chest, leaving Julia with an odd flutter of unease she couldn't quite name. In the hallway outside the green room, that same production assistant found her colleague near the coffee station. "Did you warn her?" the colleague whispered. "How could I? What was I supposed to say? Hey, Miss Roberts, just so you know, Joy's planning to ambush you on live television. I'd be fired before lunch. This feels wrong." "It is wrong. But what can we do?" They exchanged helpless glances and returned to their duties, complicit in something they couldn't stop. Meanwhile, on set, Joy Behar sat in her chair, unusually quiet, a predatory calm settling over her features. The other hosts had noticed. They always noticed when Joy got like this, that particular gleam in her eyes, that barely suppressed energy that suggested she was loading up ammunition for something big. Whoopi Goldberg, the show's moderator and its moral center, had pulled Joy aside before the broadcast. "What are you planning?" she'd asked directly, her tone carrying decades of friendship and equally long-held wariness. "Just going to have an honest conversation," Joy had replied, her smile sharp as a blade. "Isn't that what we do here? Have honest conversations about real issues? There's a difference between honest conversations and ambushes, Joy. Maybe some people need to be challenged. Maybe America's sweetheart isn't as sweet as everyone thinks." Whoopi studied her colleague's face, recognizing that stubborn set to her jaw, that self-righteous gleam. Over the years, Joy had developed a pattern. She went after celebrities she deemed too perfect, too beloved, too privileged. She seemed to take personal offense at anyone the public adored, as if their very existence was somehow fraudulent, as if success and kindness couldn't possibly coexist. Whoopi had seen her do this before, watched her tear into guests with an aggression that wasn't journalism so much as blood sport. "Just remember we invited her here," Whoopi said quietly. "She's our guest." Joy's smile didn't waver, and guests should be able to handle a few tough questions, right? Whoopi walked away, troubled but helpless. What could she do? Joy had seniority, influence with the producers, and a fan base that mistook cruelty for courage, that believed being provocative was the same as being profound. All Whoopi could do was try to moderate the damage when it came. And it was coming. Anyone who knew Joy Behar's work recognized the signs. The countdown began. 5 minutes to air, the stage manager called out, his voice cutting through the pre-show buzz. Stagehands made final adjustments to camera positions. Sound engineers checked levels one last time. The studio audience settled into their seats, buzzing with genuine excitement. Many had arrived hours early, some clutching photos from Julia's movies, Pretty Woman, Erin Brockovich, Steel Magnolias films that had meant something to them, that had been there during breakups and celebrations, sick days and girls' nights. Others simply wanted to see Hollywood royalty up close, to witness that famous warmth in person. 2 minutes. Julia took her position just off stage, breathing steadily, centering herself the way she'd learned to do before stepping into character, before facing hundreds of press junket interviews, before walking countless red carpets. She'd done this hundreds of times. The entrance, the wave, the settling into the guest chair, the easy banter, it was choreography she knew by heart. 30 seconds. The show's opening music began, upbeat and familiar. The lights brightened to their full intensity. The cameras went live, red recording lights blinking on. "Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The View," Whoopi Goldberg began, her warm, authoritative voice filling the studio. "We have a truly special guest joining us this morning. She's won 3 Academy Awards, starred in some of the most iconic films of the past 30 years, and has been called America's sweetheart by just about everyone with a pulse. Please welcome the incomparable Julia Roberts." The audience erupted. Not polite talk show applause, but genuine, enthusiastic, stand up and cheer applause. Julia emerged from backstage, that legendary smile lighting up her face, her wave graceful and warm as she moved down the short walkway. She paused to acknowledge the reception, made eye contact with audience members in the front rows, placed her hand over her heart in genuine gratitude. She knew how to make people feel part of the moment, how to share rather than simply receive adoration. "Julia, so wonderful to have you here." Whoopi stood to greet her, and they embraced warmly. The affection between them was real. They'd known each other for years, had crossed paths at countless industry events, shared genuine mutual respect. Julia made her way down the panel, greeting each host in turn. Sarah Haynes practically bounced with excitement, giving her an enthusiastic hug. Sunny Hostin offered a professional handshake and a warm, genuine smile. And then there was Joy Behar. Joy remained seated while every other host had stood. A small power play, subtle but deliberate. Her smile was present but didn't reach her eyes, which assessed Julia with cool calculation rather than welcome. "Julia," she said, extending her hand without rising. "Thanks for coming." "Joy," Julia replied pleasantly, taking the offered hand, noting its coldness but choosing grace. She settled into the guest chair with practiced ease, crossed her legs comfortably, adjusted her dress, and looked around at the panel with open, friendly expectation. Little did she know that Joy Behar had been planning this moment for weeks. Little did she know that she was about to face the most hostile interview of her 3-decade career. And little did Joy know that she was about to learn the difference between kindness and weakness. The first 10 minutes proceeded smoothly, almost deceptively so. Whoopi led the conversation with her characteristic warmth, asking about Julia's latest film, a powerful drama about family, forgiveness, and second chances that was already generating serious awards buzz. "The emotional depth you brought to this role is extraordinary," Whoopi commented. "I watched it twice, and both times I was just wrecked by your performance." Julia's face showed genuine pleasure at the compliment. "That means so much coming from you. This character, she's been through trauma, she's made mistakes, but she's fighting to become better. I think we all recognize ourselves in that struggle." "The scene where you confront your daughter about the past," Sunny added, leaning forward with evident admiration. "That was some of the most powerful acting I've seen all year. How did you prepare for something that raw?" "A lot of it came from conversations with women who've lived through similar situations," Julia explained. "Women who've had to reckon with their pasts, who've had to ask forgiveness, who've had to forgive themselves. Their stories informed every choice I made." Sarah jumped in enthusiastically. "And you're working with Marcus Chen directing, which must have been incredible." "Marcus is brilliant," Julia agreed. "He creates this environment on set where you feel safe to be vulnerable, to take risks. That trust is everything." The audience watched, engaged, and happy. This was what they'd come for, an insightful conversation with someone they admired, glimpses behind the curtain of the creative process. But Joy Behar had been unusually quiet, sitting back in her chair, arms crossed, that predatory smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Those who knew her work recognized that look. She was waiting, calculating, letting Julia get comfortable before she struck. The temperature in the studio was about to drop. "You know, Julia," Joy said suddenly, her voice cutting through the warm atmosphere like a knife through silk. The shift was instant and jarring. "I've been sitting here listening to all these lovely stories about your process and your character work, and I have to ask." She paused for effect, letting the tension build. "Don't you ever get tired of the act?" The studio went dead silent. Julia's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in her eyes, confusion mixed with the first hint of wariness. "I'm sorry, what act?" "Come on," Joy said, leaning forward now, her tone dripping with false camaraderie that barely disguised the venom beneath. "The whole America's sweetheart thing. The warm smiles, the remembering crew members' names, the charity work. It's all very calculated, isn't it?" Whoopi immediately tried to intervene. "Joy, I don't think." No, I think this is an important conversation." Joy cut her off, her eyes never leaving Julia's face. "We're always talking about authenticity in Hollywood, about who's real and who's fake. Julia Roberts has built an entire career on being perceived as this genuine, down-to-earth person. But is that real? Or is it just the best performance of her career? The air in the studio shifted. Crew members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Camera operators kept filming, but their faces showed shock. The audience sat frozen, waiting to see how Julia would respond to this sudden, unprovoked attack. Julia took a breath, her smile becoming a bit more fixed, a bit less warm. Joy, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Are you suggesting that basic kindness is performative? I'm suggesting, Joy said, her voice taking on that sharp, prosecutorial tone she used when she thought she was really onto something. That someone as successful as you, someone who's made hundreds of millions of dollars, someone who lives in multiple mansions, maybe the relatable, humble thing is just good branding. Joy. That's not fair, Sunny tried to interject, but Joy was on a roll now, energized by her own aggression. Here's what I think is fair, Joy continued, clearly enjoying herself. I think it's fair to ask celebrities who present themselves as paragons of virtue to back it up. You talk about charity work, Julia, but how much of your massive wealth have you actually given away? Percentage-wise? Because it's easy to throw some money at a foundation when you've got more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Julia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Her hands, which had been resting casually in her lap, pressed together slightly. I don't generally discuss my charitable giving publicly because I don't believe in doing it for recognition. But since you're asking, I've donated tens of millions over the years to causes I believe in. Tens of millions, Joy repeated, her tone mocking. Out of a net worth of what? 250 million? That's barely 10%, Julia. The average American gives away about 3% of their income to charity, and they're struggling to pay rent. You could give away 90% of your wealth and still live in obscene luxury. But you don't, do you? The attack was so sudden, so calculated, so filled with venom, that even the other hosts looked stunned. This wasn't journalism. This wasn't even particularly coherent criticism. This was something else entirely personal, mean-spirited, designed to humiliate. Julia's voice, when she spoke, was still controlled, but had taken on an edge of steel. Joy, I came here to talk about my film, to share some stories about the creative process. I didn't come here to justify my existence to you. Ah, see, that's interesting, Joy pounced. Because the moment someone asks you to back up your image with actual facts, you get defensive. That tells me something. It tells you that I don't appreciate being ambushed, Julia replied, her voice still measured, but her eyes flashing now with the first sparks of real anger. There's a difference between asking challenging questions and launching personal attacks. Personal attacks? Joy laughed, but it was hollow, performative. I'm asking you about the gap between your public image and reality. That's called journalism, Julia. Maybe you're just not used to being challenged because everyone's too starstruck to ask real questions. Whoopi tried again, to redirect. I think we should get back to discussing Julia's film, which is really what she's here to. No, I want to hear this, Joy interrupted, waving Whoopi off dismissively. I want to hear Julia explain how someone who plays these noble, strong women on screen can be so fragile when asked to defend her lifestyle choices. You play Erin Brockovich, this crusader for justice, but in real life, you're hoarding wealth, while people starve. You play characters who stand up to power, but you are the power, Julia. You're part of the system that keeps ordinary people down. The audience began to shift uncomfortably. A few people exchanged glances. This had gone from uncomfortable to disturbing. They'd come to see a conversation, not a public execution. Julia uncrossed her legs and leaned forward slightly. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before, but somehow more powerful. Joy, Can I ask you something? Sure, Joy said, smiling that predatory smile, clearly thinking she'd won, that Julia was about to crumble. What did I do to you? The question hung in the air. Excuse me? Joy said, momentarily thrown. What did I do to you personally? Julia repeated, her gaze direct and unflinching. Because this isn't about my charity work, or my wealth, or my image. This is personal. So I'm asking, what is it about me that bothers you so much that you invited me here under false pretenses just to attack me on live television? Joy recovered quickly, falling back on righteous indignation. This isn't personal, Julia. This is about holding powerful people accountable. Accountable for what? Julia's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her controlled demeanor. For being successful? For being liked? For not publicly detailing every charitable donation I make? For smiling at people and treating crew members like human beings? Which of these terrible crimes am I being held accountable for, Joy? You want to go there? Joy shot back, her own voice rising to match. Fine. Let's talk about your marriages. 3 of them, all failed. Let's talk about your estrangement from your family members. Let's talk about the rumors from set that you're difficult, that you're demanding, that the nice girl image is just that. An image. The studio went deadly quiet. This had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Julia stood up. The movement was so sudden, so decisive, that it shocked everyone in the room. She rose from the guest chair, with the fluid grace of someone who'd made thousands of stage exits. But there was nothing performed about this. This was real anger, real dignity being defended. Okay, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. We're done here. We're done when I say we're done, Joy snapped, but her voice wavered slightly. Something in Julia's demeanor had shifted, and even Joy, in her righteous aggression, recognized it. No, Julia said, her voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that's somehow more powerful than shouting. We're done when I say we're done, because this is my interview. I agreed to come here. I cleared my schedule. I showed up early and prepared thoughtfully to talk about work I'm proud of. And you, she turned to face Joy fully. You invited me here, not to have a conversation, not to explore ideas, not even to genuinely challenge me. You invited me here to humiliate me, to tear me down, to feel better about yourself by trying to make me feel small. That's not. Joy tried to interrupt. But Julia kept going. 30 years of professionalism and restraint cracking open to reveal the steel beneath the smile. Do you know what's really interesting, Joy? You accuse me of performing kindness, but I've spent the last 30 years watching you perform cruelty. You think because you wrap it in the language of journalism, because you call it asking tough questions, that somehow makes it noble. It doesn't. It makes it cowardly. How dare you, Joy sputtered, her face reddening. How dare I? Julia's voice filled the studio now, commanding and clear. How dare you? You want to talk about my wealth? Fine. I made that money by working my ass off for 3 decades, by choosing roles carefully, by being professional when others weren't, by showing up and doing the work. I earned every dollar, Joy. I didn't inherit it. I didn't marry into it. I built a career through talent and hard work and, yes, a little luck, because life is like that sometimes. She took a breath, her chest heaving, years of restrained responses to critics and gossip columnists and people who thought her success was somehow undeserved, finally breaking free. You want to talk about my charity work? Here's what I'll tell you, and then I'll tell you why I usually don't discuss it. I've funded schools in Mississippi and Louisiana. I've built libraries in underserved communities. I've paid for full-ride scholarships for dozens of students. I've donated to cancer research, to environmental causes, to organizations supporting victims of domestic violence. I've done this quietly, without press releases, without photo ops, because I was taught that charity done for recognition isn't charity. It's ego. Joy tried again to interrupt, but Julia's hand came up, a single gesture that commanded silence. But apparently, according to you, because I don't publicly detail every donation, because I don't calculate my giving as a percentage of my net worth for your approval, I'm a fraud. Because I'm successful and I haven't given away everything I've earned, I'm part of the problem. And because I smile at people and remember their names and treat them with basic human respect, I'm performing. Julia moved out from behind the guest chair, standing in the center of the stage now, and everyone in the studio could feel the shift in power. She wasn't a guest anymore. She wasn't on the defensive. She was in complete control. Let me tell you something about performance, Joy. I've been acting professionally since I was 18 years old. I know the difference between a performance and reality. And you know what I've learned? The kindest people I know don't have to perform kindness. It's just who they are. The most generous people don't announce their generosity. They just do it. And the most genuine people don't need to defend their authenticity because it speaks for itself. Are you saying I'm not genuine? Joy demanded, trying to regain ground, but her voice was shaking now. I'm saying you invited me here under false pretenses, attacked me without provocation, tried to humiliate me on live television, and now you're upset because I'm not crumbling the way you expected me to. I'm saying that maybe the reason you can't recognize authenticity is because you're so disconnected from it yourself. The audience collectively inhaled. My marriages? Julia continued, her voice now carrying the weight of genuine emotion mixed with righteous anger. Yes, I've been divorced. You know what that means? That I've been brave enough to leave situations that weren't working rather than staying in them for appearance's sake. That I've chosen honest failure over false perfection. And yes, I've had family issues. Because guess what, Joy? I'm a human being with a complicated family, just like millions of other people. The only difference is that when my family struggles, the tabloids write about it. She turned slightly, addressing not just Joy now but the cameras, the audience, the millions watching at home. You asked me if I get tired of the act. Here's your answer. There is no act. This is who I am. I'm someone who's worked hard, who's made mistakes, who's tried to use success to do some good in the world, and who believes that treating people with kindness costs nothing and means everything. If that threatens you, if that bothers you, if you can't believe that someone can be successful and still be kind, then that says everything about you and nothing about me. Joy's face had gone from red to pale, her eyes darting around the studio as if looking for support, for backup, for someone to step in and rescue her from the verbal dismantling she was experiencing. But no one moved. The other hosts sat frozen. The crew watched in stunned silence. The audience was riveted. You know what the saddest part of this is? Julia said, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its power. I actually used to respect you, Joy. I thought you were someone who asked difficult questions because you cared about getting to the truth. But this? She gestured at the set, at the interview, at the ambush that had been planned. This isn't about truth. This is about cruelty disguised as courage. This is about tearing someone down because their success makes you uncomfortable, because their happiness feels like a judgment on your bitterness. That's completely unfair, Joy protested weakly. Is it? Julia challenged. Because here's what I think happened. I think you looked at your life and looked at mine, and decided that the only way to make sense of the difference was to convince yourself that I must be fake, that I must be performing, that no one could possibly be genuinely content, genuinely grateful, genuinely kind. Because if I'm real, Joy, then what does that say about you? The silence in the studio was absolute. Not a cough, not a shuffle, not a breath. Julia reached down and removed her microphone with practiced efficiency, the small clip-on device coming free in her hands. I came here to talk about art, about storytelling, about work that matters to me. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who mistakes bitterness for wisdom and cruelty for strength. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk out of here with my dignity intact. I'm going to go home to my family. I'm going to continue working on projects I believe in. And I'm going to keep treating people with kindness, not because it's an act, not because it's good branding, but because that's who I choose to be. She placed the microphone carefully on the guest chair, a small gesture of respect for the crew who would have to clean up this mess. To everyone watching at home who's ever been attacked for being too happy, too successful, too kind, you're not the problem. To everyone who's ever been told that your kindness must be fake, because the world is too cynical to believe in genuine goodness, keep being kind anyway. And to everyone who's ever walked into a room and been ambushed by someone who decided to make you the villain in their own story, you have every right to walk back out. She looked directly at Joy Behar one last time. I hope whatever you were trying to accomplish here was worth it. I hope tearing me down made you feel bigger. I hope the ratings are good. But I want you to know something 30 years from now, when people think about this moment. They're not going to remember whatever point you thought you were making. They're going to remember the day you invited someone into your home and attacked them for the crime of being successful and kind. Julia turned toward the exit, but Joy, desperate to have the last word, called out. Running away. How very brave. Julia stopped, turned back, and smiled, not the warm, welcoming smile she'd arrived with, but something sharper, more knowing. Joy, I learned a long time ago that there's a difference between running away and refusing to participate in your own diminishment. I'm not running, I'm choosing. I'm choosing to respect myself enough to leave a situation where respect isn't being offered. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Maybe someday you'll learn the difference. And with that, Julia Roberts walked off the set of The View, her head held high, her dignity unscathed, leaving behind a stunned studio and a host who'd just learned the difference between America's sweetheart and America's pushover. The moment the side door closed behind her, chaos erupted. The producers frantically signaled to cut to commercial. Whoopi turned to Joy with an expression of disbelief and disappointment. The audience sat in shocked silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Camera operators looked at each other with wide eyes, already knowing this footage was going to be everywhere within minutes. Joy sat in her chair, her face cycling through emotions, shock, anger, defensiveness, and underneath it all, the slow creeping realization that she'd massively miscalculated. She'd thought she was attacking someone soft, someone who would crumble under pressure, someone whose kindness was a weakness to be exploited. She'd been wrong. Behind the scenes, Julia's team sprang into action, but not in crisis mode. There was no crisis. Julia had handled herself perfectly, had stood up for herself with grace and power, had drawn a line and walked away when it was crossed. Her publicist was already fielding calls from media outlets, but the strategy was simple. No comment. Let the interview speak for itself. Julia herself got into her car calmly, asked her driver to take her home, and spent the drive looking out the window at the city passing by. She felt oddly light, as if a weight she hadn't known she was carrying had been lifted. For 30 years, she'd bitten her tongue during insulting interviews, had smiled through invasive questions, had remained gracious in the face of cruelty because that's what was expected, what was professional, what was required to maintain her image. But today, she'd chosen herself, and it felt right. Within 20 minutes, the internet exploded. Clips from the interview flooded every social media platform simultaneously, but the response wasn't what Joy Behar had hoped for. People weren't praising her for tough journalism or holding celebrities accountable. They were outraged. Hashtags formed spontaneously. Number stand with Julia, number respect Roberts, number view gone too far. Within an hour, they were trending worldwide. Celebrities began weighing in immediately. Directors and co-stars who'd worked with Julia shared stories of her professionalism and genuine kindness. Even people from different corners of the entertainment industry found common ground in defending her. "What I just watched wasn't journalism," tweeted acclaimed director Marcus Chen. "It was a public bullying session disguised as an interview." Julia Roberts is one of the most professional, dedicated actors I've ever worked with. She deserved so much better than this. Actor after actor shared their experiences. Julia spent every day on set, learning crew members' names, asking about their families, making everyone feel valued, wrote her Notting Hill co-star. "That's not an act. That's who she is." But the most powerful responses came from ordinary people. Teachers who shared how Julia's foundation had funded their arts programs. Students who'd received scholarships bearing her name. Hospital staff who'd worked with her during quiet charity visits that were never publicized. Social workers who'd seen her donations transform community programs. "Julia Roberts funded my entire college education," wrote one young woman. "No press conference, no photo op. Just a scholarship that changed my life. And Joy Behar has the audacity to call her fake?" The backlash against Joy was immediate and brutal. The show's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Network executives received thousands of complaints within hours. Advertisers began making nervous phone calls. Every think piece, every news segment, every commentary came to the same conclusion. Joy Behar had crossed a line, and America wasn't having it. By evening, Joy issued a statement carefully crafted by lawyers and PR professionals. "I have enormous respect for Julia Roberts and her body of work. Today's conversation was meant to explore important questions about celebrity culture. I regret if my approach caused any discomfort." It was a classic non-apology, the kind that takes responsibility for nothing while pretending to address everything. Social media saw through it instantly. "I regret if my approach caused discomfort," one viral tweet mocked. How about, "I'm sorry I ambushed a guest and tried to humiliate her on live television"? How about, "I was cruel, and I was wrong"? How about an actual apology? The pattern became clear as people dug into Joy's history. Clips of previous interviews resurfaced, showing similar attacks on other guests. A picture emerged of someone who used her platform not to inform or enlighten, but to enforce her worldview and punish anyone who didn't conform to it, anyone whose success or happiness felt like a personal affront. 3 days later, The View announced that Joy Behar would be taking a brief hiatus to pursue other projects and spend time with family entertainment, industry code for "we're removing you until this disaster blows over," and desperately hoping everyone forgets. But people didn't forget. What started as a routine promotional interview had become a cultural inflection point. A moment that sparked conversations about interview ethics, about the difference between accountability and attack journalism, about how we treat successful people, especially successful women in our culture. Julia Roberts had walked into that studio as a guest and walked out as something more. A symbol of boundaries, of self-respect, of the revolutionary act of refusing to be diminished. 6 weeks later, Julia's film opened to record-breaking numbers. Audiences turned out in droves, and while the movie itself was excellent, everyone knew there was something more happening. People were voting with their wallets, showing support for someone who'd stood up for herself, proving that choosing dignity over drama still mattered. 4 months later, at the Golden Globe Awards, Julia won Best Actress. When her name was called, the standing ovation lasted over 4 minutes. When she finally reached the microphone, her speech was brief, gracious, and characteristically focused on others. "I share this with everyone who's ever been told they're too much or not enough," she said, her voice clear and strong. with everyone who's ever chosen kindness when cruelty would be easier, with everyone who's ever walked away from toxicity and wondered if they were being too sensitive. You're not. Your boundaries matter. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And choosing peace over conflict, choosing self-respect over the approval of people who don't respect you, that's not weakness. That's strength. The applause was deafening. Everyone knew what she wasn't saying, what she didn't need to say. Her confrontation with Joy Behar had been about exactly this: knowing your worth, setting boundaries, refusing to participate in your own diminishment. The moment became a cultural touchstone, referenced in think pieces and college courses, in therapy sessions and book club discussions. It sparked broader conversations about how we treat people in the public eye, about the difference between holding people accountable and simply tearing them down, about mistaking cruelty for honesty and bitterness for truth-telling. What started as Julia Roberts walking onto a talk show became a defining moment in how we think about celebrity, kindness, success, and the right to walk away when respect isn't reciprocated. It reminded millions of people watching that being kind doesn't mean accepting cruelty, that success doesn't require justification, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to play the game someone else has designed to make you lose. The lights in Studio 7 were eventually turned off. The set was struck. The crew went home. The scandal faded from the news cycle, as scandals do. But the lesson remained, echoing through countless conversations and countless lives, that everyone, famous or not, successful or struggling, beloved or unknown, deserves basic human respect. That walking away when that respect is denied isn't running away, it's standing up. And that sometimes America's sweetheart has to remind America that sweetness should never be mistaken for weakness, that kindness is a choice made from strength, not a mask hiding fragility. Was Julia Roberts right to walk out? Did Joy Behar cross a line? The questions echoed across social media and dinner tables, in workplaces and group chats. But to anyone who'd actually watched the interview, to anyone who'd seen the calculated cruelty disguised as journalism, to anyone who'd ever been attacked for the crime of being happy or successful or kind, the answer was crystal clear. Julia Roberts had done something rare and revolutionary. She'd drawn a boundary and enforced it. She'd demanded respect and walked away when it wasn't given. She'd shown millions of people watching that you don't have to accept mistreatment, that you don't have to smile through cruelty, that you don't have to stay in rooms where you're not valued. And in doing so, she'd reminded the world that the true measure of strength isn't how much abuse you can tolerate. It's knowing when you've had enough, and having the courage to walk away with your head held high.